Gentlemen, I've had a week. Not going to lie. Just had a week. I feel like every day, when my phone blows up, and it blows up a lot, I know that the Raiders have done something, and that usually means it's something stupid. I thought I'd lived through all of that when we got through the firing of Antonio Pierce. Frank and I got to talk to Jory about that on Wednesday, and I thought, okay, the worst is done, but whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, phone starts blowing up again. And I'm like, well, what the hell could be happening now? Only to find out that then the Raiders fired Tom Telesco. I have thoughts on this. C-Rob, I want to get your thoughts on it first. You wrote a piece, by the way. I put it out on Twitter X. You wrote one of the smarter things I've seen written about the problems with the Raiders in a long time. It was really well done, man. It's worth everybody checking out. Great job by you. What are your thoughts now as the organization moves on from Tom Telesco?
Well, the fact that Telesco had a good draft, Brock Bowers, fantastic first overall pick, Jackson Powers Johnson, centers should make all rookie teams this year. His first two picks are great. I would say that operationally, Telesco didn't do anything to necessarily get fired. But what the Raiders have realized is what a lot of franchises are realizing about the top candidates in this field. And I would say the top two candidates, Mike Vrabel, obviously the free agent right now, and Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator from the Detroit Lions, have both set out letting teams know that synergy with their general manager is going to be important. And from that standpoint, it's going to be someone they want to know, they want to have a relationship with, and that they're going to understand that if they're the head coach of an operation, that general manager, A, is going to be loyal to them first, not the owner, is going to be loyal to the coach first, and B, going to go out and get the players that ultimately fit the culture and the scheme and the things that they want to set forth on the field. That's something that Ben Johnson has seen very intimately in Detroit between Dan Campbell, obviously, and Brad Holmes, the general manager there, have worked extremely well together. I think it's something that Mike Vrabel, coming out of the Tennessee Titans experience, having his issues with John Robinson ends up fired. And again, I don't think Mike Vrabel had anything really to do with that. And then Rand Carthon comes in. There's issues between Mike Vrabel and Rand Carthon. There becomes this triangle between Carthon, Vrabel, and ownership there, where things went sideways really badly for him. And then he goes to a Cleveland Browns operation where he looks at Andrew Berry, the general manager, Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, and sees those two working together really well in unison, despite the struggles of the Cleveland Browns, despite the litany of problems, and frankly, despite Jimmy Haslam, who's not considered a top-tier owner in the NFL. You still saw a coach and a general manager effectively every day working together to try and repair problems that were being created, sometimes outside of their own boundaries. So I think the Raiders know, Mark Davis knows, Telesco being there was going to be an impediment, and they're shooting big here. I do think that Vrabel, again, is still that number one play for the Raiders. I think Ben Johnson is the number two play. And I know people are saying, well, they're going after candidates who aren't necessarily getting national media attention. Okay, yeah, sure. There's probably a plan B, but there's no doubt that the top two on everyone's list that's the top two on the Raiders list right now.
I think this is like the new era of you want to get the general manager that the coach will work with, and you come in together. And it baffles me that like the Titans, the Jaguars are not doing this. And even the Bears, like George McCaskey gets out in front of the media and somebody asks him, like, do you think it's important to have synergy between your general manager and your coach? And George McCaskey says, I don't think that matters at all. Like, oh my God, now we figure out why the
Good
Bears
Lord.
stink. Like that, what a quote. And the Bears are just an absolute tire fire at this point. So yes, I think that's why I believe, even the Raiders delaying this was kind of weird, whatever. This is the right call. You want to come in with synergy, like you said, a GM that's going to work with a coach. Remember the era of like the coach wanted to be the personnel guy too, that kind of passed. Now you realize you need to separate these two jobs, but you want a Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch type of situation where you're working in tandem the whole time. You're not just, the GM isn't just like hired after the fact, like it's going to happen with the Titans. The coach isn't hired by a GM who's a lame duck and might be gone in a year. Just clean the slate, bring both guys in together to work together. And I think that's the best way. I think it's very smart for the Raiders and the other teams who are just saying, no, we're going to have a tandem. It's almost like one hire and two.
I think what's interesting too is when you start to talk to teams and you're talking to like team presidents and about the dynamic of general manager hires now, a lot of people are looking at that Detroit situation and they're staring at Brad Holmes and they're going, in Detroit, they've taken the general manager position and they've spliced it a little bit. And they basically said to Brad Holmes, don't worry about the cap, man. Don't worry about balancing. Like we've got cap taken care of. We've got, analytics taken care of. Here are all these things that we have taken care of that we can tie into your department. But your department is scouting. We want you to go out and know find the talent, know what Dan Campbell wants, know what our culture is, know your scouts, know your pro personnel scouts, have that tight bond. This is your unit. It's your crew. That's your platoon. Run it at the highest possible level. And by the way, that's the biggest piece of our front office pie. And we will figure out how to tie it in to the rest of the organization. I hear more teams wanting to do that. That's one of those things with, Chad Brinker, obviously, who's the head of football operations with the Tennessee Titans. And there's all this talk in there about, who are they going to bring with general manager and will he have final say? And isn't it just going to be somebody Brinker wants? Yeah, it's going to be somebody Brinker wants. It's going to be someone that Brinker can turn to and say, you know what? It's going to be similar to the Lions. We want you to do scouting. We want you to get the culture guys. We want you to hit on these draft picks. We want you to have the greatest street free agent lists, all these different things that they realize when they look at Detroit. Detroit's been so good at going out and getting the right players, extending those players, keeping them in-house, and then letting someone else worry about cap, letting someone else worry about how does this roster fit together 3 years down the line. I think as we move forward, more teams are looking at these situations, and eventually I think even the Raiders will get there and see the general manager position isn't what it was 20 years ago. It's not what it was 10 years ago. There's so much more on a general manager's plate, if you're a full service general manager, than ever before. And I think teams are starting to smarten up and realize we can divide this labor up a little bit more and just make sure our general manager's doing literally the most important job that we need our general manager to do, and that's go out and find the pipeline of talent. By
the way, real quick, if I would have told you 3 years ago, much less 5 or 10, that the model franchise of the NFL would be the Detroit Lions.
Right.
Like everybody's like, look at how great the Lions are run. Oh my goodness. Like we're in a time warp right now. It's unbelievable.
But all of this speaks, guys, to something that we've talked about repeatedly. I will echo again. I believe the only way you truly fix culture in an organization is by having a clean sweep of everybody and getting everybody on the same page from day one. If you're constantly trying to put a Band-Aid on this thing, it never works. So to me, even though it was asinine that the Raiders let Antonio Pierce walk up to a podium and speak, and maybe it's troubling that it took them even more time to figure out what to do with Telesco, I don't really care about that. What I care about right now is everybody's gone and it's a fresh start. It's a clean start, and it's a truly clean start.
But Fitz, let me ask you this. A big part of what's being pitched, right, from the Raiders franchise, and this was sort of the crux of why I wrote what I wrote, which was that a problem, I think, with Mark Davis as an owner is that he is constantly thinking and paying tribute to the homage of his father, right? He's constantly living up to this legacy of the Raider way and silver and black roots and all these different things. And when you talk to other people, they're like, it's small potatoes. They got to stop doing that. They have to now forage for their own identity. Particularly Mark has to seek out his own identity. You don't have all these other cornerstone franchises. And I said this in the piece. You don't have the 49ers aren't sitting there going, we got to stick, Bill Walsh revolutionized. They're not still talking about Bill Walsh. They love Bill Walsh. That's a chapter of their past. They pay tribute to it, but it does not shape where they go every time they think about making a hire. Can they live up to what Bill Walsh made us in the 80s and early 90s? You don't have the Packers going, Vince Lombardi is this foundational corner piece. It's in our DNA, so we have to live up to what Vince's teachings are. They don't do that. They go, look, we love it. That's a great thing for our history book. We pull out the photo album every once in a while. We look at it. We celebrate it. NFL Films is awesome. But you know what? Let's talk about the now. Let's talk about how to build for the now and be in the now. And I will say this, Fitz, I do think that moving on from Telesco and Pierce in tandem, even if it was messy, and it was messy how it happened, I think it is the right move. I think the wrong move here, though, and again, this goes back to Mark Davis trying to find his identity. There's certainly a strong undertone being emanated from that franchise, and I think it's coming from Mark, that Tom Brady is going to be this big change agent in all of this. And yet, even Tom's biggest fans across the league, people who love Brady, will ask the question, has he ever run an NFL franchise? No. Has he ever coached a team? No. And they will even say, has he really truly ever evaluated quarterbacks or other players? No. And I'll give you one specific instance. Someone really close to Tom I was talking to brought up the idea that, hey, we haven't seen Tom evaluate quarterbacks yet, really. And, in terms of just the minutia of what comes into evaluation, analytics, you're literally measuring frame, size, how fast do they get the ball out? What do their arm mechanics look like? What are the base? All these things that I assume Brady would know about. So I pushed back and I said, you're telling me Tom can't evaluate quarterbacks? And he said, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the way Tom evaluates quarterbacks is poisoned by Tom looking at it from his vantage. Tom says, this was my experience. I went to Michigan and worked my way up. I went to Michigan and learned how to scheme and be mechanically sound and do this and do that. And he said, so when Tom sets out, he sets out looking from, frankly, a more narrow field of vision of, here's what Tom Brady did to become a great quarterback. And that doesn't have to be the same formula for every other quarterback that you look at in an NFL draft. Other guys get there different ways. And can Tom show, and we'll see, to be fair, we haven't seen it yet, can Tom show that he can accept in his evaluations that other quarterbacks can become elite players in ways that he did not necessarily engineer himself? Lamar Jackson's experience to becoming one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league, Josh Allen's experience to becoming one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league, is not even close to a 1-to-1 in terms of how Tom Brady did it, other than maybe the work ethic.
The thing is, like, with most great players, they don't become very good general managers or coaches because they did things on the field that other guys just can't do. Like,
right.
That's why Michael
point.
Jordan wasn't a great owner. That's why it's very rare for a great player to be good in those spots. John Elway couldn't land a quarterback his last few years in Denver, and on and on and on, because it's hard for them to, like you said, look at other guys who came from a different background. Like, Tom Brady ain't looking for the Drew Hensons of the world. Let's put it that way, right? Like, it's completely different. And I do wonder if this is just Mark Davis making another mistake on a big name, like his head coaching hires, like, ooh, John Gruden, I see him on Monday Night Football every week, and ooh, Josh McDaniels, everybody's after him, so I better be too. There's better paths, and Tom Brady might be awesome at this job. We don't know yet, but he hasn't done it before. You're handing him it seems a lot of power. We just don't know. We have no idea right now. But why are you giving him this? Because he's got the name Tom Brady and he's won all these rings, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be great at what he does. Like, Ozzie Newsome is the outlier of, like, a great player who became a great general manager. Usually the great players don't become great general managers and coaches. The history is there.
Like John Elway was one of the worst ever in spots, right? As a general manager of the Denver Broncos.
He did build a championship team. I always have to say that.
That's why I'm saying in spots. Like, he did. Yeah. He had a 2 to 3 year run that was thunderous. He went out and got Peyton Manning. He hit
built that defense,
huge right in the middle. But then there's quite a few other spots where you're like, man, okay, Paxton Lynch. You're like, all right, here are these other mistakes that he made. So it can happen, but I think that's a perfect example of when Frank talks about a player like Tom Brady saying, here's what I see the limitations being, and that's not always accurate when they're reflecting that onto other people that they're evaluating. Not everybody can be a Tom Brady and play until he's 45 at the level that he did.
I think part of the problem here, C-Rob, if we're being honest, is that the best identity for Mark Davis to assume is invisibility. Like, he's come out flatly and repeatedly told the world he's not a football savant. He's not a brilliant football mind. And so
Yeah,
part
we
of
know.
that is him using it. I think he uses it as a crutch. He defends all of his decisions by saying, hey, I'm going to go hire a great football mind. And everybody tells me this is a great football mind. And now he can turn around and say, well, I've gone around and I'm giving part of the team to Tom Brady because he's Tom Brady. And that way it's not my fault. It's Tom's fault. And there's this displacement that goes through all of it. But the fact is, culture, the one thing I would say about culture is, to me, it's created top down. I've met Mark Davis. I've sat in the room with Mark Davis. There is absolutely nothing about that man that makes me sit there and think, this is the leader of men. Mark Davis isn't that guy. Like, he didn't have that. So many NFL owners, and I'm sorry to be harsh on Mark Davis here, but like, let's be real. So many NFL owners got to that point because they accomplished something great that made them billionaires, that allowed them to build a team. Mark Davis was the son of Al Davis. Like, that's what you did. The only thing he's done in his life is be the son of someone that was a pioneer to the NFL, whether he was great at the end of his life or not. Like, the only thing Mark has ever accomplished was being the kid of somebody that accomplished something. And I think that reflects sometimes. Like, I don't think Mark Davis knows a damn thing about leading people, about standing up and being the presence in a room that gives you confidence and culture, about the guy. Like, he doesn't have the swagger that Al had to come out and have the Raider way. Like, nothing about Mark Davis says any of that. He needs Brady, not just Brady mind. He needs somebody that's like normal in the room and cool in the room and has some level of like, I want to be around this, and like culture creator. Cause like, there is nothing about, like, from, and not just the haircut, not just the fashion, but the human being does not exude any level of confidence that you want to build an organization around.
And I will say this too, Fitz, like, there are so many people that have come out of that franchise over the last 10 years where their regime, their plan has crashed and burned, and Mark has made the decision to pull the plug, and quickly, right? And I would argue that some of that is learned on Mark Davis's part. When you look at maybe the last 10, 12 years of Al Davis, the last 15 years of Al Davis, you go all the way back to Art Shell's firing in the mid 1990s. You know, this is going to be their 15th coach in 31 years. That's crazy. 15 coaches in 31 years.
Wow.
And that's not counting the interims. That's counting actual coaching hires, right? They've hired 15 head coaches in 31 years once they replaced Antonio Pierce. And only part of that is in the last 30 years is on Mark Davis's resume. So he did learn some of that in the latter years of Al Davis. But when you talk to some of the people who've come out of the fire under under Mark Davis, they will tell you that one of the things that Mark lacks is, in the middle of things going wrong, having the emotional, schematic, and just really constitutional ability to go, we are in a terrible spot right here. Let's endure a little longer, maybe a lot longer, and see what ultimately happens. And I will tell you, the Lions ownership got destroyed for years and years and years. And now one of the most popular clips in Detroit Lions history is Sheila Ford Hamp in the middle of Dan Campbell's second year, and Brad Holmes, the entire organization that it is now, in the middle of that second year, when they were dead to rights. It was
like 1-6 or something.
They were like 1-6. She's on the practice field. It's awful. It's like Dan Campbell's going to get fired. I remember doing the podcast with Therese and being like, they got to fire this guy. Yep. Like, this is just the same thing. And Sheila Ford said, nope, I'm sticking with him. I think this is the right thing. Even in the midst of all this, what I see is the right thing. And it's going to take time, but we're not going to make this change. We're going to be patient here. And that is that's a tectonic shift in that franchise's history for an owner from the Ford family to step forward and say something like that and then have it be right. Mark Davis has never had that moment where it's all going wrong, and in the middle of it, he goes, no, you know what? We're going to endure this time. We're going to take it maybe a year, maybe 2 seasons, and you're not going to like it, but this is the direction that we're ultimately headed in. And although I'll bring this up because I brought it up in the past, Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler, the former coach and GM prior, obviously, to Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco, they get fired, right? And I think ultimately the Josh McDaniels experience, it was never going to work, right? No matter what happened, no matter how long Mark Davis stuck with it, it wasn't going to work. However, when Mark Davis went to make that decision, and I've told you guys this in the past, the counsel he took was Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, he makes this decision about a guy, let's take this left turn. We're going to lean in Antonio Pierce. We're going back to being the Raider way and silver and black roots. And he's wearing the starter jacket. And guess what? Out of the 3 players, Max is still there and the other 2 aren't. And the guy that he chose is now also gone. Maybe Mark Davis needs to start to take counsel outside of his own organization with smarter people across the NFL than the ones that he's tapping right now. That could be part of the problem as well.
And I also, like, in your piece, I thought it was really well said that this whole, like, leaning on the past, like, what past are you really leaning on? You haven't won a Super Bowl since 1983. Like, the Raider way is being irrelevant for 40 years. The Bears do the same thing, too. Those are the 2 franchises that, like, that's why the Bears, like, will spend extra money on linebackers and be like, well, the team of linebackers. Like, who cares? Like, modernize yourself. Become the Lions. And it's not like the Lions were like 1957, Bobby Lane. Like, no, they were like, we need to modernize our NFL operation here, do something different, that we get on a different path. The Bears and Raiders right now are no different than the Lions were 5 years ago. Like, they're terrible. Yeah, they've won a Super Bowl. Good job. It's very, very dusty. Okay, like, you need to get out of the past. It's almost this college atmosphere of like, oh, we're embracing the tradition of Al Davis and whatever. Like, I guess, like, winning, go win. Like, don't think about the wins that happened 41 years ago. Think about how you win now. And I don't think the Raiders have done a very good job of that, as you pointed out in that piece. And I don't think the Bears have done a good job of that either. Those are the 2 franchises absolutely positively stuck in the past and they refuse to get out of it.
Can't blame the technology anymore, because I remember when guys would go through an interview with the Raiders prior to the move to Las Vegas, where they'd be like, oh my God, the facilities are horrible. Oh my God, the technology in the building is unbelievable. Guys would come out and be like, dude, the scouting technology is like decades behind. Like, what the hell is going on there? That all modernized when they moved to Las Vegas. And really, if you want to talk about Mark Davis's identity, the only identity he's had now is the fact that he moved the team, built a sweet new stadium, has a sweet new practice facility, and then that's it. Nothing else is okay. Great, like you built the nice digs. Great, it's still poisonous on the inside.
So let me ask you this, Vrabel, Patriots, obviously. A lot of people want time to the Patriots. A lot of people want time to the Raiders because of the Brady portion of this. Vrabel right now, do you think there's a better chance he ends up with New England, Vegas, or elsewhere? C-Rob.
I would still say New England, but here's what's interesting about Vrabel in the search that I don't think I didn't put as much stock in it initially as I should have, because I thought when the Patriots moved on from Gerard Mayo, I was like, okay, well, that's it. They cleared the decks. They knew this is their shot at Vrabel. They're going to get it done. And then someone said to me, well, did they really clear the decks? Because Elliott Wolf is still the general manager there. That front office is still there. That draft class, other than Drake May, is god awful.
Yeah, that's what shocked me. Like, what did Elliott Wolf do to deserve a second turnaround? Jalen Pope,
had a great
come on, man.
Unbelievably horrible class, right? And so, and when I was talking to this individual, he said, well, Mike doesn't have any relationship with Elliott Wolf. And this person told me, Mike's top 2 criteria are when he goes in and he sits with the owner, what connection does he really have with the owner in terms of trust, belief? Is this owner going to stick by me through the toughest of times? Because I went through Tennessee and that ultimately didn't happen. And next thing I knew, things were changing in personnel, and this sliver of dissent started to develop between myself and the owner because of things that started to change in a layer between us. So that he has to have the belief that a family is going to stick by him. The owners are going to stick by him. The Crafts, obviously, there's that pre-existing relationship. But the second,
there's a pre-existing relationship with Gerard Mayo too.
True. Yeah, right. Fair point. We can get into the whole Mayo. Let's not. I don't. I mean, you guys. I'll let you guys handle that in the midweek show. But here's another thing. Like, his criteria, it's not 1-2. It's 1A and 1B. And the 1B is, do I have a general manager who, again, is loyal to me before being loyal to the owner, because we're going to be a true tandem. And can this general manager go out and get the players I want? Don't trade away the players I need. Okay. Don't, there can't be a rug pull with an AJ Brown all of a sudden, unexpectedly. And get the players who I want culturally, get the players who I want schematically. Can they align with me and my coordinators? And I don't have to worry about, is now the general manager talking to the owner? Is he in the C-suite? Is he, starting to do things behind my back that are separating myself and him, but drawing him closer to the owner? He doesn't know that about Elliott Wolf. And that's why I've told people, I think if like Ryan Cowden, who long has been rumored to be Mike Vrabel's choice for the general manager of wherever he's the next head coach, he's the assistant to the GM with the New York Giants. But there's a back history. He was in Titans personnel under Vrabel for a long time. I think if Ryan Cowden suddenly pops up on the radar of the Raiders, I would say that's they're lining it up for Mike Vrabel with Ryan Cowden as the GM in Las Vegas. Now that's the problem with New England. You can't line it up with Ryan Cowden as long as Elliott Wolf is ultimately there. So when you ask me, about Vrabel and hey, is it Raiders? Is it the Patriots? Who's the leader? It's hard to know right now because there's a trade-off there. I think if he went to Las Vegas, I think he could get who he ultimately wanted as general manager. I think right now, if he goes to New England, he gets that ownership tie, which is probably more trustworthy, frankly, than he has with Mark Davis. I'm sorry, Tom Brady's a minority owner. I can't say he's just going to go to the Raiders because he trusts Tom. Okay, Tom's the minority owner. Tom can have the script flipped on him in that organization as easily as anybody else. There's definitely a better trust factor in New England, but I think in terms of having the general manager he wants and that alignment, it's better with the Raiders. And I think Vrabel's taking time. He's like, I'm not going to do this fast. I'm going to go ahead and weigh this all out and figure out what is the best possible scenario for me in place. And so this idea that, he'll probably get hired like 30 minutes from now, but this idea that he was going to be hired by the end of this week, I don't know is necessarily going to come to fruition.
Let me ask you something, because I think you've said this somewhere or tweeted it or wrote about it. Does the quarterback not matter too much to Mike Vrabel? Because that's New England, right? You got Drake May and all that. But I always think we overrate that. Like, we always just like, what's the best opening? Well, let's look at the quarterbacks.
O'Connell not doing it for you, Frank? AOC, come on.
AOC, not really. It just doesn't seem like, because you mentioned 1A, 1B. Where does quarterback rank on the list? And do you think it is overrated? Is the way we talk about it, because everybody's like, oh, the Bears job's awesome. They got Caleb Williams. Not really, but okay, whatever. Like, where does that rank with Vrabel, do you think?
I think in terms of all the other factors, I don't for this idea of like, well, this place has the quarterback and the other place doesn't. I don't think that's at the top of his list. I just don't. I think he knows wherever I go, the build is going to take an extended amount of time. This isn't going to be a 1-year turnaround. It's a battleship. Takes time to turn the battleship. This is going to be a couple of years, probably similar to the San Francisco 49ers situation when Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch went in. When you got to year 3 and you stood there and you looked at the roster in year 3 and you went back to year 1, you're like, yo, like 85, 90% of the players are gone from their first year. That's what he's looking at in a place like New England. The vast majority of that roster will be turned over in 2 years. That's what he's looking at with the Raiders. A very significant portion of that roster is going to be turned over. And so his thought process is, who's going to stick with me through this realistically? And one other thing I'd bring up about New England that I haven't mentioned yet is it's not the same environment as it used to be. It is really rough in New England right now because the outside pressure and the vitriol from the fan base has really amped up in a way that ownership is unfamiliar with. And I think that outside candidates believe some of that leaked into their thought process with Gerard Mayo, which is scary. All of a sudden you had the Kraft family kind of on their heels going, oh my God, we're literally getting nothing but flamed nonstop by our own market. This is so unusual for this to be like this. We're having our head coach called inept at times in terms of the way that, he's handling things inside the building, in terms of the things that he's saying publicly at times, the misalignment in statements. For ownership to potentially have reacted to that in the firing,
bad leadership.
I think
that's bad leadership.
It scares candidates, Frank, because they're sitting there going, wait a minute, they didn't used to care about outside noise because they didn't have to. Now there's a lot more outside noise and it's different. And they feels like the last couple weeks prior to Gerard Mayo getting fired, they ended up reacting to that a little bit in the decision that they made. And if you're Mike Vrabel, you're sitting there going, I sure this is the same situation with the Crafts that I remember? Because
it's almost
not
like
like it used to
Robert
be.
Kraft was propped up a little bit by an all-time great coach and an all-time great quarterback.
Uh,
That's maybe why we shouldn't put Robert Kraft in the Hall of Fame, but that's a different rant for another
oh,
day.
jeez.
I agree with owner shouldn't go in the Hall of Fame, Charles. Whatever, but I think it's bad leadership to have the rabbit ears like that, and I think all of these. I wrote about this. All these situations are bad. All 6 openings. So there might be 5 or 4 by the time we get done taping this, but I think every one of these situations is bad. And if I'm a Ben Johnson, if I'm a Mike Vrabel, I think one of the reasons Mike Vrabel is taking his time is because there's no good option out there for him. He's like,
No perfect.
I'll take
I would
one.
say there's no perfect option.
No perfect option. You're right. That's well put. Where it's like he's going to be taking something flawed. If he takes that Raiders job, he might get his GM pick, and that's great. But he also knows that I ain't got no quarterback. I really don't have any talent outside of a great tight end and a great defensive end. Like, this is going to take 3 years, and they've gone through 15 coaches in 31 years. Am I going to get 4 years to do this? Like, I think that every single one of these openings has a drawback. Every one of them, and a significant drawback. Not just we could work through that. Like, I think again, if I'm Ben Johnson, I'm like, maybe I just go back to Detroit for another year, because I think all of these, not all of them, I think most of these situations are going to be unwinnable. I don't see there being a lot of success in a New Orleans or Jaguars who always lose. Like, it's a bad crop of teams. Not a bad.
If I'm
crop
the
of
Lions
candidates.
right now, I'm saying to Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, hey, $6 million a year. Just come
Yeah,
back
that's
for one
right.
more year.
Again,
We'll throw $6 million.
There's no
each of
salary
you make
cap.
$6 million next year.
There's no salary cap for coaches. How much is it going to take? Like, you want double your pay? Okay, cool. We can run this back next year. Look at all these. That's what I'd be saying too. You want to work for the Jets? Their owner is going to ask his kid about Madden ratings. Like, you want that job? No, don't go do that. Just be with us. What a great cocoon here.
We're going to go away.
Never. I mean, it shouldn't go away, because that just it embodies everything about Ambassador Johnson and the mess the New York Jets are. So. I just think that, yes, I think there's going to be some guys that just are like, nah, Steve Spagnuolo's getting interviewed. And I'd be like, nah, I got a pretty good thing going here with Andy Reid. I'm just going to stay. Like, why would I go deal with the Saints salary cap cleanup? Like, there's a lot of bad openings this time of year.
I will leave this conversation with the little nugget. You mentioned 15 coaches in 31 years. If my quick math is right here, the Raiders have also had 15 seasons with double-digit losses in 31 years. It's good to be me. All right, let's take a look at Wild Card Weekend. Double-digit losses. For the other side of that Wild Card Weekend, we'll take a look at some of that, plus a little bit of a look into next offseason. We'll do that after we take a quick break.
Introducing Daily Draw, the latest free-to-play game from Yahoo Sports. Daily Draw gives you a pack of 6 prediction cards every day based on the day's biggest sporting event. Download or update the Yahoo Sports app on the Apple App Store or Google Play and join the action with Daily Draw today.
Gentlemen, it is Wild Card Weekend. Let's take a look at some of these matchups. Obviously, all eyes have been on the Rams-Vikings game, which has now been moved to Glendale, Arizona, due to the LA wildfires. First and foremost, there are bigger things than football in these sorts of conversations. The lives and the damage is far more consequential than anything with the football game. But we're here to talk about football. I'll just ask C-Rob quickly on this. Like, what element does the game being moved play to the actual game we're going to see in your mind?
Well, I mean, for operations with the Rams, it's been a heavy lift. You know, they've really had to shift everything, obviously, to this game, moving to Glendale, Arizona. That's created a ton. Yeah, look, there's the behind the scenes inside the Rams. It's been 24-hour days to try and get this all squared away. But beyond really that, you're practicing and you can see the smoke, right? Like it's a situation where it clearly is on the minds of everybody on that team, not only because they live in communities that are being devastated, but you have relatives affected. You have, like parts of Malibu are burning, and there are people in that organization that have homes in Malibu. There are people, and again, I don't want to get into, there's this segment of like, oh, these big giant houses are burning down, these poor people. Like, I'm like, come on, man. Like there's elements of life that are being erased, family histories that are being erased. The Pacific Palisades is gone. That weighs on human beings in that franchise. And so you can't look at the Rams right now and say that right now life isn't on their mind. There's zero question that it is. And, I think that's an additional factor to consider here. Do I think that they put that away when they get to Glendale, Arizona, and they play the game there, and the football becomes the football? Yeah, I think that's ultimately what will transpire. But it's difficult for that team right now to be absorbed in what's happening in the devastation of Los Angeles, and to be callous, because I don't know any other way to really approach it. It's unfortunate for them that you're moving a home game that you feel like you earned. Now you're moving it to Glendale, Arizona, which will affect the crowd and the advantage that you had. And again, that's callous. We're talking about football here. Unfortunately, we have to approach it from the realities of how NFL coaches think and how teams operate. You're moving it to a neutral site zone that you hope that your fan base travels, but that's another thing too. What about your LA fan base? How many people give a shit about football right now? How many are going, hey,
oh, that's a Vikings home game on Monday night. That's a Vikings.
It's
from Minnesota's not going. Like, you could probably get tickets really, really cheap, right? Like, I assume that they're just trying to sell that place out. So if I'm living in Minneapolis where it's 4 degrees probably, I'm like, how much are flights down to Phoenix? Let's do it. Let's go. We can get a ticket for $50.
It changes that dynamic. It does.
Yeah, and that's
and Frank,
the Rams,
you wonder too. Like, again, the LA community that's going through this right now. Do you think people are like, let's go buy tickets and let's drive to Glendale and go watch this game? Meanwhile, our house burned down. We don't have, we've lost everything. Like, that's just, and again, I know people are like, why are you intermingling these two things? We can't not intermingle them. It sucks. But
there's still a football game.
It's going to affect.
We talk about football.
Yeah,
it's
going to affect it.
It does. And I saw this in passing, so I don't want to get this wrong, but didn't they cut practice? Like, they only practiced 20 minutes yesterday.
They
like
sent
that.
People home. Yep.
I mean, that's just, if you're getting ready for a playoff football game against a 14-3 team, that's not ideal. Like, again, and you're right, Charles. It's hard to talk about football, like, because there's so much more going on in life in Los Angeles than whether the Rams win or lose a football game. But we're here to talk about football. And I thought, going into this game, I thought the Rams were going to win this game. I thought they're rested. The Vikings are this letdown. And now the Rams are thinking about anything but football. Now, I will say professional athletes have an unbelievable way of compartmentalizing things and just going out and balling out when we sit here talking on podcasts and stuff like, oh, how can the Rams concentrate on football? And then they just do. Like, it's really... It's unbelievable at times how they can do that. But yeah, I don't know how, this has disrupted their whole week, their whole lives. Like, how do you leave your family behind when the fires are still burning? Like, it's a really tough spot for the Rams. I do feel for them in many ways, football and not football. And yeah, this is it's something absolutely unexpected and tragic and horrible. And it just stinks that all of it stinks. All of it. Every part of it.
I mean, y'all, I'll just say, in 2010, I was in Nashville during the floods that decimated that city and absolutely destroyed. Everybody lost everything. And the crazy part to me was that we were touring. I didn't have a choice but to keep playing the shows. So I got basically 24 hours to run home and then just see how much of my house was destroyed and then how much could be saved and what could you get out of water, basically. And then you had to hop back on a bus and get the hell out of town to go play a show. Did we play the show? Yeah. The next 3-4 shows that we had to play? Did we play them? Yes. Were they good? Not really. I mean, I understand that athletes can compartmentalize anything. I just think when you're dealing with, how's my family? What's the status of my house? What about, everybody says stuff is just stuff. Well, not if stuff is irreplaceable to you that, for me, I'm not a big hoarder. I don't really care about stuff. But there are a lot of people that are if you're Harrison Ford, or a good example, had to evacuate his house. He has lifetime worth of things that remind him of greatest moments that are gone. I just think as a human being, if you're an athlete and you're sitting there saying, man, I've got friends out there that have evacuated all over the place, and just listening to them talk about that process and trying to help them through that. I don't know how you focus on football. And certainly once the game kicks off, they'll be fine. But you can't tell me that you can prep for one of the best teams in the NFL without absolutely all of your laser focus and then still expect to come in and be your best.
And to lend a little bit of a human element on it, my parents' house burned down, I was about 10 years ago. And you don't realize all the things that are contained in a house until a house burns down. And all of a sudden it was, my mom telling me all the photos are gone. Everything that wasn't a digital photo, which was most of my life, it's gone. All the Polaroids when you were a kid, or all the things we used to take and drop off at the photo mat, the 1 hour photo mat, all that stuff from the 80s and the 90s is largely completely gone. And, it's weird, but like, your sports trophies from, when you played high school sports, or, the VHS tapes we had of you, playing varsity football or whatever else, just these little snippets of memories they're gone forever. Thank God for my sports career, by the way. Nobody wants to see that. But it's you don't really realize the effect that it has until you realize what was lost. And then to see how it has affected particularly my mother ever since then. My mother has always had this, like, there's just overhang from it. You can't ever forget it. And she still, even now, even today, still remembers things. Every once in a while, she'll be like, oh, that's right. We had this thing that I had tucked away in the closet that I had forgotten about. And I didn't even really think about until now, because prior to the house burning down, I hadn't thought about it in 5 years. And, those are real things that people deal with. And it's a really tough situation. And I'll tell you what, to shift it to football, though, I will say I do have one thought on this game. And I've had the thought, obviously, prior to the disaster happening in LA. When I look at that matchup, and Frank said that he leaned toward the Rams, I did too. And I think part of the reason why I lean toward the Rams is when I think about defensively, schematically, what Brian Flores likes to do, hey, let's just jam everybody up at the line of scrimmage, and we're not going to let you know ultimately what we're going to do with our defensive play call until after the snap. I think if there is a quarterback who has the ability to deal with something like that, particularly in a pressurized situation, it's Matt Stafford. And not only from the mental standpoint, the mental capacity of reps and having seen things before and being confused before and working his way out of it, but also from an arm strength perspective, because everything has to speed up. You have to get the ball out faster. Maybe you process things a half second later, but your arm strength is such that you can make up for it in throwing a rope, 15 yards, a 15-yard out. I do think that's the advantage, just from a football perspective, that the Rams have going into this game, is that they have a quarterback who is experienced, can process quickly, and does have two, I guess you could argue like what's going on with Cooper Kupp right now, but two ultra high ceiling players in terms of their ability to work through defensive chaos in Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So from that standpoint, I did like the Rams.
And we already saw it before. The only two teams to beat the Vikings this year are the Lions and the Rams. The Rams put 31 on them. Like, if all things were normal in this game, I think the Rams would be a really good upset pick. Not a huge upset; it's a small spread, but yeah, we'll see. I just want to see how the Rams respond to this, and again, nobody wants this backdrop to the game, but yeah, I think it should end up being a pretty good football game for whatever that's worth.
All right, so then we get to Philly, Green Bay, which looks like one of the better games of the weekend, obviously, but still trying to figure out what impact concussion protocol could have on Jalen Hurts. You got to wonder, Frank, if this impacts maybe some of the play calling. Like, we always talk about the tush push, all these things. Like, are they going to approach this game? Is Jalen Hurts going to be as comfortable running the football? Like, there's a lot of questions, even if he's on the field, about what it means and sort of what his health, how his health impacts the game plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to wonder about Jordan Love too. He's dealing with the elbow. So, with Jalen, I think he's going to be fine. But yeah, 2 weeks off, you might get a little rusty. I don't know. But I also look at it this way with the Eagles. Eagles are 12-1 since September. Only game they lost was a game Jalen Hurts was knocked out in the first quarter against the Commanders. And they won their last two games, first with a second-string quarterback and then with a third-string quarterback, by a combined score of 61-20. Like, I get they weren't playing great teams those last 2 weeks, but this Eagles team can absorb if Jalen Hurts is a little rusty. Like, they're so good everywhere that even if Jalen isn't great right away because he's had 2 weeks off and the concussion, all this kind of stuff, I still think they can overcome that. They're just so good that, yes, they would like Jalen Hurts to be Jalen Hurts, but I think they're fine either way. Like, this is such a good Eagles team that we haven't really given enough credit to throughout the season.
Yeah, I think this is what the Eagles prepared for, honestly, when you went and got Saquon Barkley. This is it. This is the Eagles. It wasn't just, well, okay, Saquon makes us, more dynamic. That was a big part of it, but it was backstopping what playoff football ultimately looks like and what's going to happen to us when we get into a scenario where either Jalen Hurts isn't throwing it effectively, or it's sort of the game plan defensively calls for us to run the football more, or Jalen Hurts is banged up and hasn't thrown the football in a couple of weeks, which I think is concerning. He hasn't thrown any passes since week 16. Not great for your first game back to be in the playoffs, let alone you're coming out of the concussion protocol. So look, there's no question he's on the field. He's going to play. A.J. Brown took a day of rest. Everybody freaked out on Thursday. He's fine. He's going to be on the field. They're going to be at full power. I would just expect that the Eagles very quickly are going to lean into going and getting Saquon Barkley, trying to establish the line of scrimmage, trying to dictate the tempo of this game. I think for the Packers, safety play is going to be extremely important, not only because of, over the top responsibilities with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, but also because you're going to have safeties that are going to be able to tackle and come up and support. Edgerrin Cooper, one of the best rookies on the field defensively. They need him to play at his absolute ceiling right now. As important as the defensive line is, I think the back seven for the Green Bay Packers is going to be just as vital in this game, because I do expect that if Hurts comes out slow, and they may even try to work the scheme like that, the first 15 plays may be very much Saquon Barkley heavy. The Packers have to be able to say, look, we can withstand this, we can stand up to this, and at least from that standpoint, our defense versus your offense, we can keep this in a realistic range, because we know offensively, look, you take Christian Watson off the field, that affects the Green Bay Packers.
Huge. I think it's
I mean, if you're the Packers right now, I'm staring at him, and all of a sudden, Jayden Reed, who really should have took a monumental step this year, can't catch the football.
He's been a ghost for like 7 weeks since that Lions game.
He has turned into a player that, and it's just inexplicable. All of a sudden, he can't catch passes. And if anything, I think if you ask me, like, what's an X factor for the Green Bay Packers, some people are going to point at Josh Jacobs and say, hey, that's another thing. When they felt like they've had to roll it away from the pass game, that's why, Josh Jacobs became what he became, particularly in the second half of the season. I think it's Dontavian Wicks. I really do, because last year during the playoff run, particularly against the Cowboys, I watched a guy who wasn't dropping passes, which is the big bugaboo with Dontavian Wicks, but looked like he was capable of stepping into a number one wide receiver role. He's become a little more of a factor in the offense the last couple of weeks. I think Wicks has got to have a big game against the Eagles. It's going to be difficult, obviously, against the Eagles cornerbacks and that defense. This is
good defense. Who do you think comes out of the NFC, Charles? Who do you think is in the Super Bowl in 2 weeks?
I think the most complete team in terms of health, talent, ability, it's the Eagles. I don't think this is a question. The one thing I can't discount is that the Lions are just on this weird, I don't even know how to really explain it. Like there is a element of belief that the Lions have, and in a shocking, extremely high pressurized game against the Vikings. And the Vikings had their chances and missed it. But that's the point. They forced misses, particularly in the red zone against the Vikings, against a team that easily, really, if we're looking at how the Lions played in the second to last game against the 49ers in the first half, I was like, this Vikings team put up 40 easy.
Yeah, I thought
and
so
instead,
too.
They went crazy up front. The pressure. Aaron Glenn had a
Glenn was awesome.
Glenn
was awesome last Sunday night.
Masterpiece, absolutely. And you're like, but it's not only that. It's also just this. I don't even know how to quantify the belief that the Lions truly have that they can just overcome anything. They're like, whatever. Yeah. We'll just go ahead and over. Jimmy, I thought when David Montgomery went out, that's when I was like, oh, this is like a panic moment, because that guy is absolutely the stud tempo setter. Like, as much as I like Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery is the guy who just beats the living hell out of you at that offensive line, and they just break teams. Jahmyr Gibbs comes out, and I thought someone made the great comp. They're like, this is what we thought Reggie Bush would be when he got to the NFL. And I was like,
wow. Yeah,
I was like, yeah, this dude's pretty badass. Like he's given a full season. He's, in the all-pro conversation at the running back position if Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley aren't being, nuts, ballistic. Yeah. So I guess I sometimes I can't.
By the way, this Lions home field advantage is a big deal.
Right.
That's a big deal too.
And that plays into it.
All right. So Let's get to the other game from the wild card weekend. A lot of eyes on Jayden Daniels making his playoff debut. Tampa Bay, Washington. This is a Tampa Bay team, y'all. I know Jayden Daniels is the best story in the world, and we got to talk about Jayden Daniels because he's the best story in the world. I get it. But, man, I just feel like we're sitting here watching Baker just crush teams, and we keep waiting for – I know they struggled against the Saints. I don't care. Tampa Bay's been a really fun, electric story this year. So I'm interested in this game, Frank. I know it's Jayden Daniels, but, man, at some point we're going to have to stop and give Baker the appropriate amount of flowers.
Absolutely. I mean, he has played really well, and I think about this with the Buccaneers. Who are the two number one seeds? The Detroit Lions and Kansas City Chiefs, obviously. The Detroit Lions won at Detroit. They should have won at the Chiefs if Todd Bowles goes for 2. This Buccaneers team has stared down the best teams in the NFL, and they could beat anybody. I've been asked, if there's one team completely off the grid who makes a Super Bowl run, who is it? I've said the Buccaneers. Other than the teams we all know, the quote unquote contenders, if there's a team outside of that, it could be the Bucs because Baker's really good. Jalen McMillan's come alive in the last 5 weeks or so. Bucky Irving, really, really good rookie running back for them. I don't think their defense is great, but everybody's kind of got some flaw. And I think that they win this game. I think they give the Lions all they can handle next week if that ends up being the matchup. It is a pretty good Buccaneers team. Now, the one thing, Baker can't turn it over. He led the NFL, 16 interceptions, led the NFL 25 turnover-worthy plays via Pro Football Focus. He's got to take care of the ball in the playoffs, I think. But the Buccaneers have been able to overcome that earlier this year. So I just think the Buccaneers, you're right. The Buccaneers, we're all going to talk about Jayden, and he's awesome. And he could take over this game, and he could win this game by himself. He's that good. I think he's already there. Even as a rookie playing his first playoff game on the road, I have no problem with Jayden Daniels. He's going to be awesome. But this Buccaneers team is really under the radar. They're a good football team.
I think when you look at the Buccaneers, one of the things that to me was the most compelling thing the second half of the season was Jalen McMillan stopped being a rookie, and he became that in the passing game, that superb level number 2 option to Mike Evans, who realistically you're like, that guy's going to start to show up every week. And that's what we saw down the stretch. All of a sudden, he started to show up every week. Hey, newsflash, it wasn't Jalen Polk, who is the second best wide receiver coming out of Washington. It turns out it was Jalen McMillan, which was some of the things you heard in the draft. Hey, all the hard stuff that they asked someone to do, and it's not Rome Odunze, it's Jalen McMillan. All of a sudden, that's showing up in the NFL. He was far more prepared for this moment, this second half of the season, when they really had to count on him down the stretch. And then, look, Bucky Irving, you want to talk about tempo. You want to talk about a 195-pound guy who plays like he's 225. When he is going off and just abusing defenses, breaking tackles, factoring into both the run and the pass game, they are so dynamic, and I think that helps Baker Mayfield so much. So I think, from an offensive standpoint, Washington's going to have their hands full. I can't discount the Jayden Daniels factor that they don't ever feel out of anything, ever.
He's awesome.
Ever.
Yeah.
Even when they should be overmatched, they don't ever feel out of anything. And when you talk to people in the organization, they're like, he has that quality that if we're down 8 and there's a minute and a half left, now our guys are walking around going, all right, we got this. Let's do it. Let's put this together. He's huddling up like Joe Montana and saying, hey, isn't that John Candy? It's
dating yourself, Charles. You're dating yourself.
I am dating myself. Everybody can look up that reference.
A perfect reference.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. By the way, one other quick thing with the Bucs, Cade Otton's probably coming back. We have Baker Mayfield made Cade Otton a star during the middle of the season when Evans and Godwin were out. Cade Otton comes back for this game, so the Bucs only get better for this matchup.
Good call by you. All right. From there, let's get to Frank's power rankings, but more importantly, how it ties into this weekend. 5 teams that could knock the Chiefs out. We'll figure it out next after a quick break. All right, Frank, you've got your power rankings up. We like to destroy you for them every week, but this time you've got 5 teams that could knock the Chiefs out. So let's go through this list because, as I know,
what are you laughing about, Charles?
Y'all are on your own on this one. Can I go ahead?
You just
5.
You're just taking the Chiefs.
5.
There's
Rob,
five.
It should be noted, he gave us 5 teams and did not give us the Minnesota Vikings as one of those 5 teams. The 5 teams that Frank has given us, the Chargers, 5. The Bills, the Ravens, the Eagles, the Lions. No Vikings,
5.
Frank?
Five
Vikings.
supermodels that almost dated Charles in the last 25 years. Let's have conversations. Let's go ahead and do a fairy tale conversation.
Let's start here. If you had to bet your house, Frank, on the Chiefs I know the Chiefs are the field. Everybody always says take the field. It's a better bet. I don't
Always
care
take
about
the
that. I'm not right. I get the betting logic is always take the field. But you know what I'm saying. If you had to bet your house or Charles's house on the Chiefs or the field, are you taking the Chiefs or the field this year?
I'm taking a field. Again, I think that, yes, it probably is ridiculous that 5 teams are on this list. But
right where the
I can
Chiefs
make an
want
argument
us.
for any of them.
Right where the Chiefs want us right now.
For any of, yeah, I get that. And the Chiefs were improving late in the season. I get that. But I would take the field. I'm not even... I'll pick the Ravens right now to win Super Bowl. I think the Ravens are the best team of football as far as the way their defense came along to match their offense. This offense had 4,000 yards passing and 3,000 yards rushing. Like, this is an awesome offense that they have with a guy who I think should win MVP, Lamar Jackson. And the defense, after they moved Kyle Hamilton back to free safety, as everybody's talked about, played like a top 3-5 defense in the NFL. Like that, and they have the Hall of Fame coach. And yeah, so I think the Chiefs, I mean, part of the exercise of like who can knock off the Chiefs is saying the Chiefs don't have an easy road here. We could talk about, close games and all that early in the season. I don't care about that. There's some quality opponent. The Bills have already beat the Chiefs. The Ravens are stacked. Like, they're really good. The Eagles, we talked about how good they are on both sides of the ball. The Lions, I mean, the Lions are
you're glossing over the Chargers here, Frank. You have the Chargers on this list. The Chargers had 2 shots at the Chiefs this year and didn't beat them either time.
What happened a month ago? A month ago, the Chargers played at Arrowhead. The Chiefs needed a last-second field goal as time expired to beat them, 19-17. If you're going into a game, you're going into the playoffs, what do we talk about first? We dumb it down, right? We say, who's got the coach, who's got the quarterback? I know Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert aren't exactly Andy Reid and Mahomes, but that's a pretty good duo. And this Chargers team played really well down the stretch and almost beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead a month ago. Like, I get it's different, playoff Patrick Mahomes and all this. I'm not saying the Chargers are going to beat the Chiefs. But if the Chargers end up playing the Chiefs in the divisional round, that ain't an easy out. I don't think that the Chiefs just beat them by 14. Like, we saw this game a few weeks ago, and the Chargers were right there with them. And again, the Chiefs needed a field goals time expired to beat them.
Chiefs haven't gotten better in the last month, have they? They haven't played.
The Chargers have too, though. Justin Herbert. Chiefs. Have you noticed Justin Herbert play a pretty darn good football the last 5 weeks? Like, he's taking off. Like, Ladd McConkey's taking off. Like, this Chargers team is, again, there's no guarantee they get past the Texans, I guess. But if they do, and they play the Chiefs, it's a tough game because they're so well coached, and they have a hot quarterback who we all know is really, really good.
I mean, the Chargers,
5 teams, guys.
The Chargers.
How many
wins.
though? There's 4. Do you disagree with the other 4? Chargers, let's put this aside.
Okay.
The Bills can beat them. They already have. The Ravens can obviously beat the Chiefs. I'm not saying they will.
I think there's 2.
They can.
There's 2.
Who are the 2?
Baltimore.
Sure.
Buffalo. That's it.
So you don't think the Eagles or the Lions
can beat the Chiefs?
No.
Wow.
Defend yourself, good sir.
Ideologically, or let's just say from a historical perspective, I've been here before. You've been here before. Frank has been here before. And we've sat here going, man, I don't know. Oh, there's no, geez. I
went 0-4 picking against the Chiefs last year in the playoffs. I get it.
It's playoff time, and Tyreek Hill's not there this year. And yeah, he's brought certain guys along, and there's this, but geez, the defense. And then all I know is in December, I'm staring at the Chiefs. I'm like, man, they're cranking it up defensively again. Like, here we go. Oh, man, Travis Kelce, who was out of shape all season, basically the first half of the season, suddenly is in shape. He's worked himself into shape, and he's become the factor that we expected down the stretch of this season. Oh, geez, they got a chance to rest guys. I think if there's any Achilles that I look at with the Chiefs, it's like, are we back to that place where if you need to run the football and set tempo, and it's funny because Chiefs fans have been killing me on this for years, because I've always said, like, find that running game, make sure that you can carve it out when you absolutely have to. That is a question I have going into the playoffs, is if they get into a scenario where Mahomes isn't raising the level of all these other players. And I think, in terms of the skill positions, they're better off now than they were the vast majority of the season, because you see health and you see guys that are working themselves into shape. I think from an offensive line standpoint, moving Joe Tooney to left tackle that's resolved.
It has calmed that down a lot. Yeah,
ton of problems. Yeah, they had so
many
problems.
What a player, by the way. Just be like, go kick out and play left tackle because we have no other option. Tooney's like, sure, I can do that. Like, wow,
no problem.
That is impressive.
That's an
it's really, really impressive.
Yeah, it's an all-pro level player. Yeah, absolutely. Like, you can play guard in all-pro level. We can slide you over to tackle. That's some Zach Martin.
That was clutch. That was absolutely
Look,
impressive for him to do that.
Guys, all you got to do to beat the Chiefs is beat one of the 2 or 3 greatest head coaches of all time at this point, one of the 2 or 3 greatest quarterbacks of all time, and one of the 2 or 3 best defensive coordinators in the NFL currently. That's fine. I mean, just whip up that game plan and just sort of put it in the KitchenAid mixer and see what kind of cookies you come up with.
Show me you can do it. When I stare at the Bills, right? When I stare at the Ravens, show me that you can do it. And from a historical perspective, I remember for years and years and years when Tom Brady was dominating the AFC. And if it wasn't Tom Brady, it was Peyton Manning. Right. And I kept staring at Phillip Rivers and the Chargers. And we would get into these conversations where we'd be like, man, they're loaded. Oh, my God. This is it. This is the Chargers' year. Then we would get to the playoffs. And when they absolutely had to do it against one of these teams, they would slip up and not be able to do it. They would would crack. And so it's hard to beat quarterbacks who have such an immense mental edge and then are paired with a guy like Andy Reid. Okay. And I think just from the dynamics of, hey, are the Eagles as talented as they've been on defense? Yes. Are they as diverse and balanced as they have been on offense? Yes. Is Jalen Hurts better mentally in the postseason than Patrick Mahomes? No, he's not. Nobody is. I would argue there's no quarterback in the NFL that's better in the postseason mentally than Patrick Mahomes is, nor is there a better relationship between a coach and a quarterback and an ability to pull out plays that this worked 7 years ago. Let's stick that back into the play, the game plan. Okay, here's the film that we're watching. Let's flip this play at the line of scrimmage. If you see this one guy to play, just flip it. Can flip the play. I'm sorry. I know that there's data points that you can reach for. I know that there's numbers. I know that there's matchups, but I have been here staring at the Chiefs too many times and said, nope, finally the rest of the field has caught up. And then I watch the games and I'm like, God, why are they so high level when it comes to these instances? Well, they've been here before. The long-winded, I know, as usual. The one last thing I will bring up that does concern me about the Chiefs a little bit.
You have a concern about the Chiefs? What? I thought they were walking on water over here.
They have played a lot of postseason football for a number of years here, where you're like, these are guys that are trotting out there with a whole extra season. Some of these guys, Mahomes, Kelsey, Tooney, some of these guys who have had a whole extra season of football in the postseason. And, you hope that that's something that ultimately doesn't catch up with them from an injury perspective all of a sudden in the middle of the playoffs.
The reason I'm picking the Ravens win the Super Bowl is Lamar's having obviously a historic year. Like, he's unbelievable, right? But we've seen him press in the playoffs. Like, even he said, I've been antsy in the playoffs. He admitted it this week. I thought it was a very honest moment from Lamar Jackson. The biggest difference, and we talked about this in the offseason, we talked about this in September and October and November, he all of a sudden is not looking around like the whole franchise is on my shoulders. He's like, hey, there's this 247-pound dude I can hand the ball to 25 times this game. And he's still obviously at the peak of his powers. He had 1,900 yards rushing. I think that makes the entire difference with the Ravens this year. You are going to see a relaxed Lamar Jackson because he knows he doesn't have to do it all. I just think that this team is, I think this is Lamar Jackson's time. I think.
What about Zay Flowers?
Yeah, Zay is a concern, no doubt at all.
You're missing him in the first round. Right? Okay. So
that's not, we all know they're going to beat the Steelers, right? Like that's not a question, right?
Yeah, I agree.
We're not,
but again, he's missing up. Okay. No, that's fine. That's
Steelers.
fair. But again, it's significant enough that he's missing a playoff game.
And look, they might not beat the Bills. As you talked about, the Bills are a championship level football team too, with an unbelievable quarterback who probably will win MVP. Like, it's a tough road for the Ravens, but I just look at this team and say, this is Lamar Jackson's time. He's finally going to get that monkey off his back, and we're going to be having a totally different conversation about Lamar Jackson in a month.
I think the way the bracket pulled out was really difficult for the Ravens. They got to get the monkey off their back against the Steelers. Then they'd have to beat the Bills. Then they'd have to beat the Chiefs. That's a Herculean effort. So let me ask you this, C-Rob. What's your Super Bowl pick? Like, who you got playing in the Super Bowl and who wins?
You better pick the Chiefs after all. That's
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
No, all right. I'm trying to remember who I put in for our playoff predictions. I'm pretty sure I picked Chiefs over Eagles in the Super Bowl. I'm pretty sure that's.
I mean, I got Chiefs, Eagles. Frank, who do you got?
Ravens over the Eagles. I think that, and that stinks. None of us picked the Lions, huh? Okay,
all right. So then let me ask this: this weekend, is there any one game that you guys think, either of you think, that is going to be an upset? Do either of you look
I'll
at
say
the board?
this, like, I don't think there's a big upset coming because even if the Rams win, they're less than a field goal favorite. I will say this, like, I don't think this is going to happen, but I think the Broncos are going to keep this closer than people think. Like, I look at that spread and I'm like, this defense is really, really good. And Bo Nix is playing really well. And Sean Payton is a heck of a coach. I'm not saying the Broncos are going to win this game, but I think they're going to put a scare into the Bills. Let's put it that way.
I like that. And that actually would be the one game that I'm most fascinated in seeing how it unfolds. Not only because, I mean, Bo Nix has had some crazy high-level games this year because he can give defenses fits because he'll run. He'll just take off and run. And he has
way
no
more
fear.
athletic than
He's
I thought.
so much more fearless than I think people gave him credit for. If you've watched the Broncos this season, nothing has felt too big for Bo Nix. We've said that about Jayden Daniels, right? Wow, nothing feels too big. It feels that way for Bo Nix too.
It does. You're right.
But
you're right.
What I think the Bills you got to be a little nervous about too is Sean Payton's kind of crazy. Like, he'll do some things in this game that you just don't expect. Like,
they got nothing to lose,
and they have nothing to lose. So
they have nothing to lose.
You tell me right now, Sean Payton isn't in his bag. You tell me he's not sitting there going, "Hey, we got 3-4 plays here that could potentially turn a game where we're going to run something they have not seen." Or and you know, a lot of people are going to go, "Well, okay, like are they going to onside kick it like the Super Bowl, or is there going to be like a fake punt or a fake field goal or whatever?" I'm just telling you, that's the other X factor in this game is that Sean Payton feels so good right now, and he knows nobody thinks we're going to win this game. So what the hell? Let me pull everything out I got, and let's see if maybe we can flip something here that nobody expects. Plus, they're coming from an environment where a lot of teams going into Buffalo, at least in those conditions, saying nothing of the fan base, the Bills fan base, but they face that going into Arrowhead too, right? Just insane environments. But at least from a conditions standpoint, there's nothing to fear for the Denver Broncos because they're like, we do this. Like we play in this kind of an environment in the cold. This is going to be a problem for us.
And they've also had some really good road performances. And obviously the Chiefs game, like, they should have beat the Chiefs. Like, they didn't. They got the field goal block. Okay, I get it. But they're just not a team that's scared of much. And speaking of the house money thing with Sean Payton, trust me, obviously I'm in Colorado. Making the playoffs was the goal. They'd have a parade downtown for them today, because this was a monkey on their back. We haven't made the playoffs in Super Bowl 50, blah, blah, blah. They made the playoffs. The goal is met. Like, now it's just anything past this is just icing on the cake.
My favorite Sean Payton moment ever, like at least from this year, was just going in there during camp. The Vegas line was that 5.5 wins over under in terms of, again, that win total. And Sean Payton was pissed. And he said, the next time I only win 6 games in my NFL career will be the first time I only win 6 games in my NFL career. I was like, I know I can't use that, but I'm going to mention it if you win more than 6 games this year. So.
Well, the wildcard weekend will be incredible. We'll be here to react to it, of course. Thanks to Stone and Andrew behind the scenes, doing God's work, getting all of this put out for us every single week. Follow us on social media. You know what to do there. And Frank and I will be back Sunday night recapping everything from Week 18. As always, we appreciate you guys. Take a moment, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, your family, tell everybody to hang out with us. As always, have a great weekend. Enjoy some football. Hang out with us again on Sunday night.